Good morning. Happy Wednesday. Happy hump day. So there's a couple more filings in Cordova versus Hinault, DMA versus fraud or troll. I only really had an opportunity to look at one this morning, so I don't know what the reply brief is going to do to change my mind about the motion for forum nonconvenience and for the bond. I mean, maybe it'll change my mind, maybe it won't. I highly doubt it'll change my mind on either issue at this point. I don't know what Lou could say to change my mind on it. But what I do want to comment on is the document that I looked at, that I actually read, was a request for judicial notice. I'm like, wow, a request for judicial notice. I wonder what this could possibly be for. Well, apparently, in a criminal matter, a federal criminal matter, which I'm really unfamiliar with, Cordova sent a letter to the court regarding his probation. And that was included as a exhibit to one of the declarations submitted in support of the reply brief, the reply to the opposition to the motion to dismiss for forum nonconvenience and motion for bond. Now, obviously the legal question is, what kind of judicial notice can the court take from it? So, like, if this was asking the court to take judicial notice of a conviction or of a sentence, those are things the court would take judicial notice of. But a document filed in the case, to me, it's unlikely that the court's going to take the kind of judicial notice that Lou wants. Like, the court could take judicial notice that it was filed. I don't see a problem with that. But to take judicial notice of the facts alleged in it as true, I don't know about that. The court might, but in my experience, in my humble experience as a first-year family law attorney, courts are not likely to take that kind of document as, with the allegations in it alleged as true. What the court is normally willing to do is just take judicial notice of the fact that it was filed in a different proceeding. And that got me thinking, he's on probation. I don't know if the underlying crime is a felony, but I do know that Canada, generally speaking, doesn't allow convicted felons into Canada. I'm wondering if they allow people on probation into Canada. I'm wondering if the terms of Cordova's probation would allow him to leave the country. If I were Randy, I would want to know the answers to those things. Now, I'm not Randy, thank God. Thank God. Glory to God, I'm not Randy. I dodged a bullet on that one, huh? Anyway, but if I were Randy and I were representing Cordova and I were trying to fight this motion to dismiss for forum nonconvenience, what I would do is I would find out the answers to those questions. Can Cordova even go to Canada? Because if he can't, a dismissal for forum nonconvenience would essentially completely deprive Cordova of any potential for recovery. It would deny him due process. It would deny him the right to bring his case in Canada because he can't go to Canada. Now, I'm not saying he can't go to Canada. Cordova isn't my client, thank God. But if I were his attorney, I would want to know the answers, because those might be an additional argument against the motion to dismiss for forum nonconvenience. So Lou might not have been quite so bright to bring that to the court's attention. Might not have been quite so bright. That might have been a faux pas. As we like to say, he might have screwed the pooch a little bit on that one. That's a legal term. Now, I'm going to pivot, because I like to talk about Iran, because Iran is big on my mind. It is essentially a global catastrophe because prices are rising everywhere. All of the efforts that Trump has made to keep oil prices down aren't really working. The price of oil keeps going up and up and up. What was it on on Monday, I think West Texas started at like 105 and Brent was like at 120. So prices keep going up. You got to remember that oil prices were around 60-ish a barrel. Around 60-ish a barrel at the start of this insane misadventure. And, that's not calculating in where it's spring in the northern hemisphere and, fertilizer is going to be in demand here in a hot minute. Planting's going to start, people are going to want to fertilize and, there's that whole thing. So we haven't even really begun to see the real costs associated with this misadventure. But Trump on Truth Social, which I don't have a Truth Social account, just in case anybody's wondering. I only see like posts on Telegram, screenshots of his Truth Social post. Apparently Trump is threatening to go ham on the civilian infrastructure of Iran. Little tantrum because he's not getting his way. Now, I am not the brightest boy in the world, and I am not a war crime attorney. Don't even pretend to be one. But I strongly suspect that targeting civilian infrastructure, if it's not in furtherance of a military objective, is a war crime. So, for example, in Ukraine, a lot of the trains in Ukraine run on electricity, and they use those trains to supply logistics to the troops up front. So targeting the energy infrastructure has a military objective to it. Also, they use the electricity to produce various military assets. So the Russians have gone out of their way to describe how targeting these facilities is actually in furtherance of legitimate military objectives. I'm not saying that they're not committing a war crime. Again, I'm not a war crimes attorney. I'm just saying that responsible states don't just target civilian infrastructure. Israel loves to target civilian infrastructure, blow up apartment buildings, completely raze towns. But, Netanyahu's a wanted war criminal, and they don't really seem to give much care about it because the United States is arguably one of the strongest nations on earth, and they have the protection of the United States. And so they're not really particularly worried about it. Although you'll notice, like when Netanyahu flies to New York or DC or Florida to visit with Trump, he flies through the Mediterranean, through international waters, through the Gulf of Gibraltar, avoiding airspace where his plane could be brought down in someone's territory who would enforce the warrant for the war crime. So you'll notice that it is a concern. It's just not a huge concern for someone like Netanyahu. But war crimes are a real thing, and people have been prosecuted for war crimes in the past. And that leads me to my next point. One of the many reasons why I don't like Trump is he has zero loyalty. A couple days ago, the pictures and names of the commanders and captain of the ship who launched the strikes on the girls' school at the beginning of the conflict, their pictures and their names were published. First of all, you'll notice that whoever gave them the targeting information, whoever said this is a legitimate military target, here are the coordinates to it, that person wasn't named. It's the person who said, okay, we got the coordinates, all right, you got it loaded in, all right, fire. Those guys were shown. Now, those guys, who knows what's going to happen to them? It's completely irresponsible to post their names and pictures, because first of all, who knows? That caused the targeting of that girls' school, 170 minor children, little girls, were killed in that strike. And there's a lot, maybe not in the U.S., but around the world, there's a lot of outrage about that. And there's specifically a lot of religious outrage about it. The Shia community especially is like, they're pretty pissed about that. Like, legitimately so. I'm not faulting them for that. That was a horrible, horrible thing that we did. And so those guys might, face assassination attempts. Their families might face assassination attempts due to this recklessness. Plus, those guys, there's a likelihood that because the U.S. said, yeah, these guys are the ones who ordered the strike on the girls' school, there's a likelihood, I'm not saying it will happen, but there's a likelihood that they can be prosecuted by the Hague War Crimes Tribunal for war crimes, which means that if they ever leave the United States, or if the United States is dickish enough to just hand them over like sacrificial lambs, they could theoretically be executed for this. I mean, that is a potential punishment for war crimes. At least it was. Maybe a kinder, gentler Hague War Crimes Tribunal doesn't do the death sentence anymore. But I mean, it still has serious potential legal repercussions. But again, who gave them those targeting, that I think they call it like a targeting packet? Who gave them that? That's what I want to know. Sure, they gave the order to launch, but who gave them that targeting packet? I strongly suspect it was our greatest ally. And we're running cover once again for them. That is just my guess. That is just a gut instinct. So, huge grain of salt. But I think that is very cowardly, and it shows a complete lack of loyalty by Trump. I don't understand why the people in the armed forces are at all happy. I saw a poll posted that most of the people in the armed forces are all gung-ho about going against Iran. I don't know if it's true. I have reason to doubt it, but I mean, this is just a shit show. There's an old Turkish saying, if you put a clown into the palace, he doesn't become a king, the palace becomes a circus. And here we are. And this lack of loyalty thing is a huge, huge character defect of Trump. Huge character defect. He does have loyalties. I can't really tell how far they go. He seems to be loyal to his family. They seem to be benefiting greatly from his presidency. Accuse Biden of doing it, and then you do it. Well, I mean, hypocrite much? He also seems to be very loyal to Israel and to the Adelsons and to the various other pro-Zionists. But like the January 6th protesters, like he could have pardoned them on day one. Blanket pardon, done. There would never be arrests or prosecutions, done. And he waited 4 years to do that. 4 years. He lost the election in 2020. He waited till 2024 to pardon him. That is just completely absurd. Completely absurd. I have no idea why anybody voted for him in 2024. No idea. Zero understanding why anybody voted for him in 2024. I will point out that elections were cast in 2020 before the January 1st, 2021 insurrection, where no one was charged with insurrection that I'm aware of. So when I did vote for him in 2020, I had no idea that was coming down the road. I guarantee you my vote would have been different had I known. Guaranteed. Zero loyalty. And just to respond to some comments, one commenter said, all these pro-Israel sites, all these pro-U.S. government sources say that, 90% of the Iranian missiles are being intercepted, not only 20%. And I gave my source, and like, Haaretz is anti-Israel government. You could just completely discount them. So let me understand this logic. the pro-government sources who are going to parrot the propaganda that supports the pro-government regime are completely reliable and trustworthy, but the one that is anti-government, that is not in support of this war, is going to lie. I mean, that's a position to have, that's an opinion to have, but then when you actually watch the videos, and so there's a ban on showing the impacts in Israel, but there's no ban that I'm aware of showing the actual incoming flights. You just aren't supposed to show the impacts. And countless videos across the Telegram channels that I follow of missiles coming into Israel. No interceptors being fired. Now, there were a lot of interceptors being fired at the beginning, and now there's very few, if any. Maybe 1 or 2 interceptors getting shot off now, when it used to be like a dozen per missile. So the 80% is not unrealistic to me. And I saw images of various cities, like before and after, like in Israel, and there is a lot of damage. I mean, the Haifa power plant's on fire. The Haifa oil refinery is on fire, or it was on fire last night. Maybe they got it put out, but it was a big fire, so maybe they got it put out, maybe they didn't. But I mean, and I've seen strikes on the DMA nuclear facility that no interceptors being fired, just boom, straight strike coming in. And you would think that the oil refinery would be a strategic asset of Israel and would have a lot of air defense. You would think the nuclear facility would be a strategic asset of Israel and would have a lot of air defense. And yet, no interceptors. They're getting hit. 80% getting through sounds a lot more. And also, Iran is using cluster munitions, which, they're a war crime. Well, you know, if Israel had signed on to the ban against cluster munitions, which they did not do, maybe they'd have a point in arguing about it, but they didn't. So they don't have a leg to stand on to complain about Iran using them. But a lot of the missiles that are coming in from Iran are cluster warheads. And so they go into like 40 to 80 different bomblets. How do you intercept that? 80% getting through does not sound unreasonable to me. Maybe it's somewhere in the middle, but let's even pretend only 1 in 10 is getting through. Let's pretend there's 90% success rate in interceptions. There's still a lot of damage. The Haifa oil refinery is still on fire. DMA has taken at least 2 strikes in close proximity to it. I don't think the Iranians were actually targeting the nuclear facility itself. I think they were targeting the support areas around it. But you get my point. Like, even if it's only 1 in 10, there are a lot of missiles hitting still. There was another one. Another commenter said, well, you know, in Iraq, you know, we bulldozed them and we only lost like 5,000 troops. Well, Iraq and Iran are 2 different stories. First of all, Iraq didn't have any allies. It was the U.S. plus like 40 other nations over the 2, Operation Desert Storm and Operation Desert Shield. Over those 2 operations, there's like 40 other nations that joined in. There was like 1 million or close to it troops on our side versus the Iraqi army that had antiquated equipment in poor repair, that had little, if any, air defense. They had some air defense, but they didn't have much. And in Iraq, the U.S. was able, and its allies were able to establish air superiority for the first invasion, the Desert Shield. They were able to establish air superiority in a minute. And once the U.S. has air superiority, it's pretty much game over for conventional kind of war, for like army meeting army on the battlefield. Not so great against kind of terrorist hide in the mountain stuff, but army on army, U.S. air superiority, once we have it, I mean, that's what we've gone basically all in on. And if we could just drop bombs willy-nilly wherever we want to, like, game over. We are about a month into Iran. We don't have 1 million troops. We don't have a coalition of 40 plus other nations. It's us and Israel. And Israel said they are not sending ground troops in. We have, I think, somewhere around 10,000 or so combat troops like 50,000 total, like, service members in the area, but like 10,000-ish ground troops. Completely different, night and day. We had masses of tanks and helicopters and infantry fighting vehicles, etc. for the Iraq War. We don't have that for Iran. The terrain is completely different. We can't just roll across flat deserts. I mean, there's a little bit of flat area, and then it's mountain. And again, it's just not an apples to apples comparison. It's night and day. Also, that was 30 years ago, roughly, give or take. The technological improvements by the U.S. over that period of time have not been substantial. They haven't been game-changing. The technological improvements and innovation for the other side, especially when it comes to drones, like Iraq wasn't using drones, period. Not the cheap fly a million of them in, and you'll lose a lot of them, but some of them will get through just because you're going to flood the enemy's defenses. They didn't have those, and they also didn't have the smaller, more targeted drones that maybe will drop small munitions, like 1 or 2 pound bombs, or that will be suicide drones, first person drones, fiber optic cable drones, even radio controlled drones. They didn't have these things. So the technological race has much more benefited a guerrilla ambush defensive style war, things that Iraq didn't have. It's just not a good comparison. I think Ukraine is a much closer comparison of two near peer. I mean, there's a big imbalance between Russia and Ukraine, and there's probably a similar imbalance between the U.S. and Iraq, although Iraq has a lot more advantages: size, population, support from Russia and China, which are much bigger manufacturing bases than the support that Ukraine you get from the U.S. and the West. And I guess just to round this out, because we're over 20 minutes already, I keep getting called a liberal, and people keep saying that I'm they say, oh, you voted for Trump. And yeah, I did vote for Trump. I make mistakes. I'm human. I make mistakes. But as far as the liberal allegation, I am incredibly far to the right of Trump. I became a father, and I became a Christian. And those two things moved my needle from very, very close to, I never was a libertarian, I want to be clear on that, but close to libertarianism to, I am way right. So far right, you wouldn't understand or appreciate my political positions. Trump, on the other hand, has always been a 1980s, 1990s Manhattan Democrat. That's where his political ideas originate from. There is basically nothing he does that is not 1980s or 1990s Manhattan Democrat politics. He was very into Democrat politics at the time. You could see him supporting the Clintons. There's a lot of pictures of him. Now, I don't think he's a very deceptive kind of guy. The Clintons are much more capable of hiding their true feelings. They're more politicians. They're more diplomatic. Trump's pretty blunt. I think a lot of people like that about him. There are some benefits to that. You can kind of read him a little bit better, but there are also some drawbacks to that, i.e. he's terrible with diplomacy. And I don't think the Clintons ever liked him, but he supported them. He supported their politics. He is not a right-wing person. He is not a conservative. He's a Manhattan Democrat. Always has been, always will be. He is left of what the center used to be. Of course, the center has shifted pretty far to the left between the 90s and today. I think it's shifting back. Glory to God. But if you want to accuse me of being a liberal, then your president is a flaming liberal. I just want to point out that before Trump, Trump has celebrated, all the gays, they love me, they're voting for me. We've got Lady MAGA. The Republicans have Lady MAGA, a literal trans person. How is that conservative? I'm not condemning anybody. I'm not here to judge Lady MAGA or anybody else. But how is that conservative? How do you square that circle? Before you call me a liberal, define what policy positions I have that are liberal. Please. I am very right-wing, very conservative. Trump isn't. And that's one of the things I condemn him for. And as far as Trump, I think he's, generally speaking, an honest person. Generally speaking. He is just incredibly whimsical. And he says what he believes, and then 2 minutes later he changes his mind. And now he completely believes something opposite. Is that a lie? I don't think so. I think he's just whimsical. He's not used to being told no. He's not used to being in a position where he doesn't hold all the cards. He is used to surrounding himself with yes men, people who tell him what he wants to hear, who withhold information from him that he doesn't want to hear. He is ignorant of the true situation in the Middle East, I believe. He is ignorant of how economies work. He thinks he could just demand something and have it be done and get the results that he expected. And anybody who tells him otherwise, be gone. He kicked Tucker Carlson to the curb. He apparently ignored Charlie Kirk. He ignored people who are telling him war with Iran is a really bad idea, and here's why. He kicked all those away because he wanted war with Iran. And so now he's just left with people who tell him what he wants to hear. He watches 2-minute videos of bombs going off in Iran and thinks that's his briefing. He's incompetent. He's way too proud. He is way too whimsical. He's way too blunt. He has no idea how to conduct diplomacy. All he can do is strong-arm demands. And he's not in a position in this war to do strong-arm demands. I don't know if or when Iran will be ready to negotiate. But they don't appear to be responding at all to his negotiation attempts, such as they may be. You'll know when there's actual diplomacy, when you see pictures of the Iranian delegation and the U.S. delegation sitting at a table in some place somewhere where they're actually discussing. Anything beyond that Trump says is just a pure lie. It's been proven time and again. Every time he says we're negotiating, they say, no, we're not. Oh, I'm talking to a shadow government. No, there's no such thing. Sorry, guys. You're wrong. And you can believe Trump. You can call me a liberal for getting my news from liberals. I don't. But, that is the way it is. And I am being borne out. My takes on this are being borne out in large part as this war goes on. It's just a giant clusterfuck, and we're going to lose. It's only a matter of how bad. And the how bad is dependent on whether or not Trump can swallow his stupid pride, make concessions, and get us out. It's going to have to be diplomatic. He's talking about just packing up and going home. Well, how do you pack up a base that's currently under fire? We can't send ships in to haul everything out because they've blocked the Strait of Hormuz effectively. What are you going to do? Take your toys and go home? Just leave everything else, just like we did in Afghanistan? That was amazing. Just leave everything. Let them loot it. Phenomenal. The very thing you criticize Biden for doing, now you're going to do. Congratulations, dude. You played yourself. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.